Hi pals, it's me Artie. They and pronouns only, and I have whipped out this t-shirt again because I thought it was appropriate because this video maybe a bit of a curveball. Maybe a bit of a curveball, not gonna lie. I have just been watching how much of an impact Zack Polanski has been making since he was voted in as leader of the Green Party. So my video is about how his acting training has probably actually been part of why he's doing so well as an actor myself, and all that shit. So I think in general, people don't appreciate the skills necessary in acting are also actually relevant in politics, particularly in today's society where you're fighting against algorithms for literally everything. And also when you're based in a country that has mainstream media that is paid for and run by conservatives. Yeah, and all of the above basically do nothing but platform Farage. Platform Farage. So I just wanted to go over kind of a little bit generally, but also specifically the skills that you learn from acting training and specifically from Stanislavski's training techniques in particular. The ones that I wrote down that are just kind of general skills you learn in acting are things like dictation. Having a good dictation is important to be understandable, but also to be relaxed and natural in your character. Memorizing, you've got to memorize so much text in acting. You've got to memorize a lot of statistics when it comes to politics, particularly whether you're doing debates on TV or having conversations or doing interviews, you've got to back up the why for your cause and what you're doing in politics. So having better memory than me, mate, because fucking hell, I miss my ADHD meds. Brain's literally a sieve, like a really, really big sieve, okay? The ones with the really big holes in. It's not I've been catching a single thing. But I would also say as well, improvisation, because, I'm not gonna lie, you're not gonna remember every single thing exactly. You're not gonna remember all of your statistics or facts or information generally exactly word for word. Some people do. Some people are really lucky and have, like photographic memories or other things, just generally being really good at being able to recall that kind of information exactly. But most people are not going to be able to do that. So having had a decent amount of training in improvising is really helpful because that also makes everything a little bit fresh every time you talk about it, which is always important for content online, content in social media, in media in general, but also probably important in politics as well, because you are talking about the same things over and over again. You have got your manifesto, you've got your important views, the things that you want to tackle. So having everything you say be a little bit different rather than literally being able to recite lines word for word. But also you've kind of got to learn to dance around a little bit with the people that you're interacting with, whether it is people like real normal people, your constituents in one-on-one conversations at in the surgeries, whatever the fuck they're called. I don't know. I've never been. Same as what I was saying earlier as well, of like, if you are in any kind of media or social media doing interviews, being able to respond to the person opposite you and thinking on your feet, because there might be some questions that you weren't super prepared for coming up. I mean, I know Zack Polanski had to deal with quite an interesting one recently because he was briefly a hypnotherapist, and he apparently did tell people they could grow their breast size with hypnotherapy, which if he genuinely believed that, that's a little bit embarrassing to have been truly a believer in. But so that's one thing that's come up for him. I don't think there's a ton of stuff in his background that has been or can be weaponized in the same way as a lot of other MPs or people in politics in general. But then this also leads on to me, just generally being able to respond and work with your partner, whether it's someone who is on your side or somebody who is neutral or somebody opposing all of your everything you are. Some people really suck at acting because all they can do is memorize and regurgitate lines. You need to also be able to actually respond to what people are saying and asking you, because I remember being taught in acting, you're not just waiting for the trigger/cue words that it's your line next. You have to be there, you have to be in that scene and actually listening and responding as the character. So it's the same thing in politics, in my opinion. Plus, when it comes to practice speech like this, the media has also given Zack a lot of material to learn from, which is also a really important part of acting, is like researching for your character, finding your character, researching the world they are in and the other characters around them. It's the same thing, because there's been so many examples of any politicians, but especially like left-wing politicians being treated in a particular way, being asked a particular kind of questions, words being twisted, things like that. There are lots of examples that he has been able to watch and learn from over the years. It's easier to override interviewers in situations like that because they will usually have a centrist or right-wing line of questioning, or at least tone to their questions. I've seen that many interviewers have basically given up responding when interviewing Zack Polanski because he's just so practicing what he's saying and how he's saying it and how quickly he's getting some of those words out as well. It's a bit like the clip of the actor Hugh, is it Bonneville? I might just have to Google that. I'm so sorry, sir. Oh, it's Julian and his pronunciation. Yeah, the clip of the actor Hugh Bonneville throwing in a quick pro-Palestine message very quickly in the middle of what he was saying as he was responding to an interviewer on, I don't know, some carpet. Was it red? No idea. But yeah, he threw it into the middle of his longer answer about other things relating to, because I think he's in Downton Abbey and they are doing like a big finale thing. I don't know. I've never watched it in my life. But also by the fact that he threw it into the middle of his answer, the interviewer couldn't really do anything about what he was saying. The editors couldn't edit it out that easily, especially if it was live. It's much easier to cut off the end of a sentence than it is to cut something out of the middle of a sentence, because a lot of the times there are things that are quite obvious that you have cut something out in the middle. Partially is that you'll see it in my videos that, even if I haven't moved a lot between the two clips, a jump cut is quite obvious, is an obvious cut. A lot of the times you can't really cut in any other way. For a lot of media, you'll also have, like filler words and filler sounds like umming and like and things like that are a lot harder to edit around, particularly in the middle of a sentence versus the end of one, because you can just find a good place to chop the end off and be done, and there's no messiness in the middle. So, a clever man. And as well, I think in general with acting, performing arts, theatre, improv, all of that in general, you also learn other roles in theatre, particularly when it comes to writing and directing. You learn how to make sketches, skits, and other short pieces of content as well, which I think has probably helped coming up with the ideas of the content that he has been putting out recently, particularly the interview style content. It's also something you can quite easily search and research for what you're going to do. A lot of YouTubers do it, researching what is currently trending at the moment, particularly in formats, because it's one thing seeing what's trending and copying it. It's another thing seeing what's trending and making it yours. So I think he's also got a few of those skills up his sleeve as well. He also has his own podcasts where people can tune in to listen to what he cares about. And then also I find generally the language he uses is way more accessible to the general public than most other politicians. I would also say that he's 42, so he's a millennial. So a lot of this just makes a lot of sense to me. And just to throw in there, he's one of us. He's one of us. I personally think that he's been putting out really easy to understand and bite-sized chunks of information, and also myth busting at the same time, through directly talking with the public. And I think this is something that not enough leftist politicians really are doing, or even leftist like creators in general. Farage, is on every TV show imaginable, and we know that there is a lot of favoritism. We have talked about how, it's mostly Labour, Conservatives and Reform who get all of the talking time, airtime on TV, and the other parties don't really get much of a look in. The Greens have the same number of MPs as Reform, and Lib Dems have more. We barely see Lib Dems fucking talking about anything. So it is my personal opinion that leftist politicians and their teams really should be thinking more outside of the box of how to connect with the general public of the UK. I know that, back when we almost had Jezza Corbyn as our PM, he focused a little bit too much on the youth vote, which was me at the time. Because when was that? 2016? Yeah, that was nearly 10 years ago. Guys, it was nearly 10 years ago. I remember that vividly. Yeah, I was 21. Some of his downfall was a little bit too much focus on the youth vote. And whilst, I think it is now confirmed that you can vote from age 16 now, I think, or that might be coming in. He might have done better off after that had been brought in, but I still think there's ways of connecting with, the middle ground of age ranges via social media. But I will say too, I feel like I've seen Zack Polanski on mainstream media a lot more than I've seen maybe a lot of other left politicians for many years, and I think maybe it's because he's been doing so well at drumming up this attention for himself and the Greens as well. Obviously, it's a recent win for him, September this year. That maybe this is like the only influx of mainstream media attention that the Greens are likely to get. So yeah, even though I feel like he has been doing so much online, he has also been doing really well with the bit of mainstream media he has been on as well recently. A lot of those journalists don't know what to do with him. They really have no idea. They kind of give up asking questions in some of the clips I've seen, or their rebuttal questions are just kind of pathetic. There is also like a lot of nuance to this as well, because I can see why people like Zara Sultana, for example, can't or don't go about doing similar, particularly in-person, on-the-street interactions as Zack has done. She has been out there speaking a lot. She has been at festivals, at marches, and other speaking events. And I think she has done a few podcasts as well, but I don't think she would safely be able to go out in the streets, particularly of Clacton, for example, asking the same questions that Zack has been asking to the general public there, or the general public of the UK, because, a lot of what's been happening at the moment is dangerous for a lot of people of colour. I feel like my political values align with Zara Sultana, but I feel like that's maybe just a really good example of we aren't all afforded the same privileges or the same basic safety. Like we're not all working from the same place. But yeah, so I feel like that is a shame for her political platform. Like I said, I align with her a lot personally. I feel like her and Zack have very, very similar platforms and manifestos. And I do really respect how outspoken Zara Sultana has been and always has been, and how much she has been punished by the Labour Party as well for being outspoken and for continuing to work in a way that aligns with her values, where many others haven't. But yeah, it has been shown how hostile the British public can be. And also, Zack does have his own history of being out there at protests and even having been arrested in the past for protesting climate crisis causes. I think the one I was reading about was 2019. So I can respect that he clearly is willing to put himself in uncomfortable and possibly even somewhat dangerous positions to speak on his morals and values. Zack describes himself as an eco-populist, which Wikipedia says is linking broad issues like high cost of living and the climate crisis as being both caused by the wealthy, but also specifically the term populist means in political science, populism is the idea that society is separated into two groups at odds with one another, the pure people and the corrupt elite, according to Kaz Mood, the author of Populism, a very short introduction. But most successful populists today are on the right, particularly the radical right. Politicians like Marine Le Pen in France, Viktor Orban in Hungary, and Donald Trump in the US combine populism with anti-immigrant nativism and authoritarianism, he added. And I would also say, obviously, it's much like what Farage also has been doing here. The Tories and the Labour Party have followed in the anti-immigrant authoritarianism footsteps.
That's my opinion!
I also personally think it is very clever that Zack doesn't self-describe as a socialist at this moment in time. Nothing comes up on Google when you search if he IDs with the term socialist or uses this term in anything written. He may have said something in a video that I've missed. So, but generally speaking, it's not really something you can just Google and see if he identifies with socialism or is a socialist politician, because even though he has very socialist values, the term socialist has a lot of negative connotations, although they are for very inaccurate reasons, thanks to the capitalist propaganda machine. Zack is for a universal basic income, for example, which is a socialist idea, maybe even communist idea. And I think it isn't too far-fetched to link this word choice with Zack's background in acting as well, because there is an inherent level of media analysis, media literacy skills that comes with learning to act. Because, you love the craft, you learn different roles in theatre and TV, particularly, like I said, writing and directing, and you love the theatre and media. Much of my own training, I think particularly, as I will go into, Stannislavski, you're taught to break down your scenes and break down your character, really learn who they are and what they want and what they are saying. It is the desire to live a role and not just perform it. A huge quote from an article I was reading about Stanislavski's tools that makes so much sense to the point that I'm making is Stanislavski's work changed the way actors thought about human behavior. So he was a keen observer of people outside the theatre and is often compared to Freud, since Freud sucks, by the way, but since both men ignited the public imagination about human life and provoked controversies and debates. I remember being taught to take time to watch people and how different people move and speak and express themselves. These techniques are useful in developing your character as a politician, but also in learning from your audience. If you can use these techniques to unpack someone's motivations and character during a conversation, then you can counter any argument and actually provide a reasonable alternative that solves the average person's issues. So there was a really great clip that I feel like addresses this really well that I will show you now.
What do you think about politicians?
Some politicians are good, then they get corrupted.
Could I ask you what you think about companies that sack their workers and then rehire them at lower pay?
Disgusting. It is hard enough for us to survive as it is.
And what do you think about 0 hours contracts with no guaranteed pay?
Despicable.
Which politicians do you think support 0 hours contracts and fire and rehire?
I wouldn't have a clue.
Would you be surprised if I told you Nigel Farage does?
No, I didn't know that. I voted for him. Disgusted, really. Now, he definitely ain't got my vote.
Why did you vote for him?
Because I thought he was standing up for the British people.
I feel Nigel Farage is trying to strip back workers' rights, protect multimillionaires and billionaires, and the way he's doing this is trying to distract us all by talking about stopping the boats and immigration.
We're at breaking point as it is with the population. We're all on such low paid jobs and everything just keeps going up.
What if I told you the asylum system costs us about £3 to £5 billion, but if we tax multimillionaires and billionaires properly, we could be raising about £25 billion.
That would make things so much easier.
We also want to stop the boats, but we think we can do it through safe and legal routes, where people can come over here, they can have jobs, they can be paying in tax, so actually it's all contributing to our society.
That's it. If they want to come over and work properly, I cannot refuse anyone who needs to better their life.
And I'll talk about some of the more specific Stanislavski techniques as well going forward. The magic if. This is probably the best known Stanislavski concept. He did not believe it was beneficial or even possible for an actor to truly believe that staged events were reality. Instead, he thought actors to put themselves into the character's shoes and consider what they would do if they were in the character's situation. The magic if makes the character's motivations the same as the actor's. Given circumstances. These are all the specifics of the character. Any facts you can glean from the script. Given circumstances include everything from the character's background to the time and place of the story and the structure of the staged world. Given circumstances are essential because they determine what actions are possible for a character to perform. Super objective. The super objective is the character's primary motivation in the play. This is the backbone of the character, the thing they want more than anything in the world. All of the actors' objectives and actions on the stage should connect to this super objective. Objective. Essentially, the objective is the answer to the question, what does the character want? The best answer to that question involves a playable action. As Stanislavski writes, every objective must carry in itself the germ of an action. Okay, whatever. Physical action. Stanislavski taught that actors must build a character's behavior through specific, concrete, performable actions. The best actions are achievable on the stage within the world of the play. Communion, believable action in the play must be directed to the other actors on stage, not the audience. When the actors communicate with one another through their actions, the performance captures more human truth than playing actions to the audience. I mean, one of the really good examples of that as well is that especially in these shorter clips where Zack is speaking one-on-one with people of the public, he isn't really directing anything he's saying at the camera. He is directing it to that person he's asking questions to. But then also in his public interviews, mainstream media interviews, you know, a lot of the times it is virtual, so he's not actually there with the interviewer, which kind of at least lets him skip over having to have the conversation with the interviewer and can have that more direct conversation with the audience watching. And then as well, he's doing the same thing again with podcasts. He's cutting out that middleman of some kind of media conglomerate of some kind, and is just speaking to you directly. Each of these as well provides different kinds of audiences and different kinds of connections. So obviously it would be quite rare for people who aren't particularly interested in Zack Polanski's politics. They wouldn't be going to his podcast, for example, but they might see these short clips of him interviewing normal people like them that might open up their possibility to looking into other things he has said and talked about and other places he has spoken about these issues. And then, yeah, the same with mainstream media opens up the audience to people who aren't necessarily his target audience or within his follower group, but are his then actual target audience, to find, speak to, and help understand where he's coming from, what he's trying to do, and what the reality is of the situation. Emotional memory. Stanislavski encouraged actors to develop their ability to observe emotional reactions in their daily lives. The emotional memories developed off stage provide the actor with strong feelings to draw from when their character experiences a similar emotion on stage. Subtext. Subtext is the meaning behind the words on the page. To determine subtext, actors must have a rich imagination to determine why their character says or does something in the play. Subtext drives the performance of a play, and spectators come to the theatre to hear the subtext, Stanislavski explains. They can read the text at home. And as well, I think in general, subtext is also subjective. Particularly as an actor, if you're reading a play, you can definitely translate that subtext in different ways, depending on your own personal experiences as well. Stanislavski and his students found that by focusing on these ideas while performing a play, they would portray their characters more realistically, instead of pandering to the audience. Their characters were more concerned with communicating to one another on stage. The actors were so focused on the character's inner life that they didn't have time to be overly theatrical. So whilst these techniques are used in acting to develop your own character, I also think these are ways that you could also look at other people and determine their character and determine their motivations, determine their background and where they're coming from and their own personal subtext. So I think obviously in a lot of ways this has helped him to develop his politician persona, because let's be real, it has to be a persona. It's not really going to be Zack your next door neighbor or Zack your best mate, you know. And whilst he might be out there fighting for these particular policies and they do align with his personal morals and values, it doesn't necessarily mean that his depiction of Zack Polanski, the leader of the Green Party, is a fully fleshed out person. So whilst he is believable and based off of his real self, it is, you know, a public persona. It's like me here. So whilst I'm not overtly lying about myself here, I'm also not giving you everything that I am either. And that's the same across the board. And I think maybe that's where we're having some issues in the present day with things like parasocial relationships. People don't really have the same amount of media literacy that they used to have, that they are taking things more at face value without questioning it. And that is half the problem with a lot of the other politicians that Zack is fighting against, really. People haven't been questioning, well, why is Nigel Farage saying XYZ? I mean, that clip I showed just now was literally the fact of he makes himself sound like he's for the working class person, but then actually all of the things he votes for, all of his actual policies, are things that are just going to push people further and further into austerity. And for those who don't like the super technical words, because he wants to make us more poor. Everything he's doing is going to make people more and more poor, except from the top 1% of the UK who already have most of the money in the entire country. He's developed his politician persona, who is, you know, like I said, probably based off of himself, but tweaked for the appropriateness of being a politician. I don't feel like he is too edgy, but he's like edgy enough. Like, he's saying a lot of things and saying things in a way that many of us on the left maybe go, well, finally somebody's finally saying it.
As you probably know, many things are a bit crap right now. Unaffordable housing, failing public transport, high food prices. The rich hold all the power. Underfunded NHS. But here's the thing, it doesn't have to be this way. We can have affordable green housing, well-paid jobs, better public transport, better health and social care, and a more equal society, all whilst tackling the climate crisis. How? By taxing millionaires and billionaires and making corporations pay a fair share of tax. By fully nationalising industries like water and rail. By building renewable energy, not oil and gas. Want to know more? Check out the Green Party.
Somebody's finally saying it this way, and I feel like Zara Sultana does the same thing too, but she can err a little bit into theory language at times, which is hard for the general public to follow because our education system is fucking bollocks. Our education system sucks. But then also I feel like he has these skills from his acting courses degree, because he went to Georgia in America for his acting course. And I mean, I'm pretty sure they teach Stanislavski fucking in everything, because everything comes from Stanislavski at this point. Like Stanislavski, everything that has come after him has basically been partially somewhat based on something he said and developed. And he was also always working on developing the technique. He never felt like it was done. So I feel like we're still working the Stanislavski technique because we're still working from what he started. But I've now lost my train of thought. What was I saying? So yeah, he's learned these techniques for building a character and understanding a character. And I think that that is a really helpful and important skill for a lot of these conversations he has, whether it's with people in media or people on the street who are just the general public. He is able to think on his feet fast enough and able to analyze the person in front of him enough based on what they are saying, where they are and what they look like, to give a reasonable, logical response, but also in a way that actually makes them listen. Because there's plenty of ways to have these conversations, and I'm not saying any particular way is correct or not. Like I would not be very good at this part because I am hot-headed. And you guys know that. And I'm also not particularly afraid of being unlikable. So I am not very good at making what I say that palatable anymore. I'm good at making what I say understandable, but I am not particularly good at becoming palatable, particularly to people who do not care about human rights of people not like them. So, you know, a lot of the things that I would say in response to some of these people will definitely not get me the vote. But that's fine. That's why I'm here instead, and not a politician. I did think about it briefly, but I don't know if that would ever have been a good idea anyway. Like, mouth too big and say too many things that get me in trouble, even though I personally don't care. You know, it's kind of not the point of being the leader of a party or an MP in particular. So, but yeah, he is much better at presenting questions and then presenting information that corrects what they believe and gives them the opportunity to reflect on what they have done, what they did believe, and what they might decide to do going forwards instead. Which I think, you know, I also don't think that the majority of people who vote right wing are going to be easily educated in that way. I really don't. But if we can educate those who are, then amazing. Because I think there are a lot of people who just really don't understand. And that's something that I've been saying for many years. And I think it will have been in my video that went out last week, where I was reading my physical TBR challenge. And one of the books I read was Abolition Democracy. And one of those sections of the video was talking about how politics is made with such a language that is so hard for normal people to understand, and it's done on purpose. I'll try insert the clip.
I think I understood majority of it, but I don't. So I think it's like a reasonably good intro text. There's not a lot of like big or complex theory kind of words. There's just a lot in there that I already kind of came to the conclusion of before reading that book. So it just felt validating to me. Like one thing in particular that I love to say a lot. So like this book, I don't know when it was written or when it may have been previously published, but this edition was early 2000s. I think the audiobook was 2005, something like that. So like it's been a long time. It's been at least 20 years since she said this, and yeah, so she basically said that politics has become more convoluted now than ever before. And I think she was talking about the last Bush administration, because it was all about Bushisms and stuff. So I don't know when that was, but like she was referencing his talking about politics. And I double checked what convoluted means, and it means really overly complicated for no fucking reason. Sort of. And yeah, that is one of the big things I've personally been saying since I kind of self-taught UK politics to myself. And it's things I say to like certain people in my family who felt like that they couldn't, or like politics wasn't for them, voting wasn't for them, etc. I know voting has its own like arguments, so, but and then like other people I've met who have also been a bit like, I just don't really understand politics itself. I'm like, yeah, that's kind of the point. Like, politicians have learned that, you know, people can either educate themselves or educate other people, so they've been making it harder to understand without, you know, like family or business connections or school connections and stuff like that. Like, it's harder to understand politics nowadays because it's, I think especially right now, it works in one way, but the way it's supposed to work is different. So a lot of people either don't believe it's meant to work in this other way, that it's like that's how it's meant to be going because of how they see it going, or the opposite, that people think what is actually happening can't possibly happen because, you know, X says this, law says this, blah blah blah. So yeah, it felt particularly validating to me, but also to like how I feel still about politics. And then yeah, just her final sort of statement really was just like, we all need to be trying. We all need to be trying to organise. We need to be trying to do things, because back when we were doing stuff for the civil rights movement, we didn't know if anything would work because nobody had ever done this before. And I think we could see that's the same sort of thing now with, you know, we are in the age of the internet, and the internet's being taken away from us. Look into your country's current censorship laws. The UK has one now.
So I think that that's what we are still suffering with today. I think the left and the right do this quite a lot. So having someone on the left who not only is willing to speak in a way that is easy to understand, but also explain where some other politicians are misleading them. Politicians who, like, whether they call themselves populists or whether they make themselves out to be someone who's speaking for the working class, or whether it's other people who are writing that down like all of their propaganda machine dummies in like the mainstream media. It doesn't really matter who exactly is like deciding that, but they all make it sound a certain way, but the truth is not that. The way things work is not that way, and you are being taken for fools because somebody is pretending to speak your language, speak the language of the average British citizen. who, a lot of them don't have degrees or only have really specific degrees or qualifications that wouldn't even address a lot of this kind of information. But yeah, that's why I think a lot of what Zack Polanski has been doing has been really important, and why I think his acting training has actually had a really big role in why he's doing so well with capturing attention and doing so well in actually getting out what his point and manifesto is, and the way he is debunking and myth busting a lot of these really vile and really useless rhetorics that just kind of go round and round and round and get recycled and just keep being adopted by more and more politicians or political parties. We need more people willing to speak about those things and being able to craftily dance around the ways that our mainstream media has been pushing things. And a lot of things have gotten a lot harder to self-teach now as well. And that's always something that I don't shut the fuck up about, because like, here's like a really good, really recent example. I went to speak to my mum and my gran about something. They were trying to work out how to delete an email address from their AOL email address book. It wasn't obvious looking at the page. Also for me as well, I haven't used AOL in like 15 years. I haven't used AOL since the internet was like fucking born, But both of those two have been using it, but they couldn't find it anywhere either. So I said, Google it, because to me, that's the first thing you do. If you don't know how to fucking do something, you look for it on Google. But honestly as well, even going on Google, it's impossible to find things anymore. So even typing in, how do you delete an email address from, I can't even remember how exactly I worded it, but something like that, all of the things that came up were actually talking about deleting your own email account. The difference as well between me and my mum, who my mum is I think young Gen X, and I'm a young Gen Y. My mum was just like reading it as if these pages were actually giving her what she was asking for. But I immediately knew that none of these pages were actually giving us what we were asking for, because they were talking about deleting your own email, not deleting an email from your address book. So then I rephrased it, and it was still giving me mostly the same fucking pages. Most of the options, when they did actually give us what we were looking for, was telling us something so fucking outdated that that's not how it works anymore. So I went back to the email page and was sort of clicking around again, kind of using some of those search results as like clues. And eventually I found it. I was like, there you go, it's there. But like, if you can't even find out how to delete an email address from your address book, then how are you supposed to be able to look up or understand political jargon, for example, or sometimes even the statistics? How are you supposed to know what statistics to believe? Because we know right-wing politicians love using statistics wrong. And it's things that I have discussed in a lot of my chronic health videos in the past, or my chronic health blog posts, for example, where a lot of statistics are not explained very well online, even in places like the Mayo Clinic. They're not explained well enough for a patient to understand. It's not accessible for an average person to understand what it means. And the one that I usually bring back as an example for that is for my Takayasu's. They say that the life expectancy after diagnosis is 10 years. That does not mean you're going to die in 10 years' time. Going into research, one of the things I started to learn is that a lot of the times when statistics say things like that, it's because they haven't actually studied past 10 years, because a lot of funding isn't produced for studies after a certain amount of time. Like, a lot of studies have had to reapply for funding to go back to some of their old patients to see how they're doing 5, 10, whatever years down the line. So many statistics like that only reach a year or a couple of years. A lot of long COVID articles and statistics are similar as well, because, you know, we're only five and a half, nearly 6 years since COVID started. So we've only got 5 to 6 years of information anyway available to us. And what the Takayasu statistic actually means is, for one, that it probably hasn't been studied past 10 years, but also a lot of people weren't being diagnosed with Takayasu's until it was really late for many, many years. Takayasu's was initially founded or like discovered and named in, I think, 1902. My butt hurts. Ow! My butt really hurts. Ow, why does it really hurt? What was I saying? Yeah, so I think it was first officially discovered and named in 1902. So this is quite a young condition, but also it's still considered really rare, even by like people who can use critical thinking skills standards, because so many diseases are called rare and they're basically not fucking rare at all. Like EDS. EDS is not rare, especially hypermobile EDS specifically. There are rare EDSs, but hypermobile EDS is fucking not rare at all. They just don't want to fucking diagnose it, so want to keep calling it rare. Anyway, it is still considered quite rare because a lot of the early symptoms are really vague. You can see my video or even the blog post as well that I originally wrote about all of that stuff if you want to learn more of those details about that specifically. But a lot of the early symptoms are really vague. So they could be anything. They could be, you caught the flu recently, or you have a different autoimmune disease. But it's not until a lot of people with Takayasu's were having strokes or heart attacks or heart failure that many of them were being diagnosed. And technically, officially, the only way to really fully know somebody has Takayasu's is from a biopsy, but that is so dangerous they basically don't do it unless they already have you in like open heart surgery. Whoops. So yeah, a lot of people used to die of Takayasu's, whereas now people are getting caught much sooner, or people are developing signs sooner. So like for me it was my arm, and it's the similar sort of thing with any other statistics. Is it's about how it's written and how it's explained, and many things just don't fucking explain it. And honestly, I think a lot of other scientists and doctors and stuff are also not understanding these statistics properly either. So I think we need to be a bit more explicit about what we mean. How is anybody going to understand if we don't introduce the information first in an understandable, digestible way? Also something I talked about in my zine for my research projects that happened this summer around mental health stuff. The link will be in the bio, so you can check it out. I basically think that you shouldn't have to be able to understand constant jargon to be able to understand what's happening to your health or what's happening in politics, because how the fuck are people going to get invested in these topics? How are people going to take charge of what they feel and what they want if they don't understand what's happening? And that is the entire fucking point. That is why they do it. That is what the inshitification of Google is for. They're taking away our ability to understand things by ourselves. Also why they are censoring the internet. Thank you and good night. Anyway, right. Anyway, Zach, if you're here, please undo this fucking censorship bill if you become the king of the world. Thank you very much, because I'm pissed off about it. Anyway, that's it from me. I thought it was like a fun, interesting, out-of-the-box topic that does still kind of technically relate to my topics of talking about media analysis, performing arts, etc. Because I really do think a lot of his appeal and skill comes from this period of his life. And I mean, look, bro, I haven't been training properly for performing arts in over 10 years. Like, I've done bits here and there since then, but I haven't taken a proper class in like over 10 years. I haven't heard anybody talk about Stanislavski in so fucking long, but that shit is ingrained into me because I remembered that bitch's name and the general gist of his shit just from me writing up my initial ideas. I was like, wait, is this a Stanislavski thing? And then so looking him up, I'm like, it was a Stanislavski thing. Thank you very much confirming. And that's also important, guys. Don't forget, things you say, you should probably also go double check that you're actually saying something that's true and not just spreading a bunch of bullshit. That's why I do try to like fact check myself, even if it's after the fact. And in videos, if I'm not sure, I'll say I'm not really sure. I'll try to find it. If I haven't found it, then I don't know. But if somebody else has that source that I couldn't find, I love it when people share a source that I couldn't find or whatever, couldn't remember the name of, to be able to find. So yeah, anyway, that's it. I'll shut the fuck up, please. God save me. That's it from me this week. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, watch another video of mine. What shall I tell you to watch? I mean, you could go watch the book video I was just talking about, because I love to read.
She had a thirst for knowledge. It couldn't have been me. I've never wanted to know anything.
If you don't love to read, I have so many media videos as well on my channel. You can go watch basically fucking anything else. And yeah, so unfortunately, I don't know if I will vote Green or if I can vote Green, because the thing is, we're still stuck with the tactical voting issue. But also, it terrifies me, the idea of doing the voting where the actual numbers overall decide who's in charge of the country, because a lot of the numbers were kind of comparable with Reform. It was a little bit horrifying. I don't know what they look like at the moment, though, with Greens. Anyway. That's it from me this week, and I'll see you next week. Bye.